Oh, welcome to the other side of medicine. I'm Dr. Christosik, and we're glad that you're spending time with us this evening. Here on the other side of medicine, we are the drug-free zone and your ticket to become independently healthy. I'm your advocate. I'm your watchdog to protect you and your loved ones so that you don't end up having to take medications unnecessarily or have to have your body cut up or drugged up. And so we understand that chronic disease in this country is out of control and people are suffering, and we need to educate more than medicate. And here on this program, that's what we're all about. I have a passion to help people to be able to come, as I said, independently healthy. Tonight, we're privileged to have a special guest on the program. It's Dr. Joel Kahn. He is a very famous, nationally and internationally known physician. And Dr. Kahn has been on TV. As a matter of fact, this evening he just got off for an interview with Dr. Phil program. And so he's constantly being interviewed by some very, very prestigious television and radio programs and podcasts. He was actually, he's a cardiologist, and he graduated from the University of Michigan. He's a clinical professor of medicine at Wayne State University. He's associate professor of medicine at Oakland University. He's the founder of the Kahn Center for Cardiac Longevity, and he's a fellow of the American College of Cardiology and a member of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. Dr. Kahn, welcome to the other side of medicine.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here.
Well, I'll tell you what, we know that, we have these diet wars that are going on, and they've been going on for, many years now, and starting with Dr. Atkins, thing got pretty bizarre. And since that time, it's gotten crazier even since then. And we have all these various diets, the keto diet, the paleo diet, and now we've even got the carnivore diet, which is hard to believe. But, the bottom line is whether it's a vegan diet or a carnivore diet, everything in between, all these people believe that whole foods is what we should be eating, that the Americans are killing themselves with their forks, and that we're getting too much refined foods. We're getting too many foods that are adulterated with all kinds of toxins in them. So we know we have that in common. But after that, it gets to be pretty wild. And it's like the Wild West when it comes to nutrition. So what do you say about what's been going on for the past 40, 50 years?
Yeah, well, I think you just said something very profound. I mean, if we really could, like a marionette, control, the diet of America, the Western world, the whole world, and we simply said, let's just shut down fast food restaurants. Let's get rid of frozen pizzas in the middle of the grocery store. Let's teach people how to actually cook food. Could be a lentil soup. Could be bone broth. I'm not going to eat it, but could be. Let's teach people skills, how to shop, batch cook, make food. Just basically turning the clock back about 100 years when we didn't have Kraft and Nabisco and some of the others. There would be no doubt it would put a strain on people, but health would blossom back. That the influence of the food industry, tied so closely and very often the same as the pharmaceutical industry, is destroying our health. And whether you get rid of that, if I could control the world, we would literally shut down all those McDonald's and Arby's and you name any other one, Burger Kings and Wendy's and Taco Bells, and we would replace them with places you pick up produce. And maybe, not to my liking, you pick up high quality, lean cuts of animal protein foods. I hate that word, animal protein, because my beans have protein and my oats have protein and my flaxseed has protein, but whatever. Everybody connotes protein with their chicken and their turkey and their fish and their beef, of course. But if we would control that, we would see a tremendous decrease in the utilization of medical resources and an increase in health. The only remaining question is what you said. Okay, we did that. We, miraculously changed American business and commerce and influence and marketing and TV commercials and, all the playgrounds that these fast food restaurants have. We got rid of that, and I would have to include sugar sweetened beverages. We got rid of all the vending machines that are in the hospitals, God knows, and other places. There still are McDonald's in hospitals. I am a staff member of a hospital, still have a Wendy's in the lobby. I mean, preying on lower income inner city people is horrible. Okay, we did that. But then we got a choice. Go down the vegan path, whole food plant-based path. Go down the vegetarian path. Go down the Mediterranean diet path. Go down the paleo path. I think we'd be in pretty good shape. Okay, I'm not sure we'd be in such good shape going down the carnivore path. Although I admit I've been on many carnivore podcasts. You have to recognize there's, an abundance of testimonials and no published research of any importance, but testimonials. Maybe for a few, that's the last remaining way they can get healthy. I don't know, but we would improve health. So, before we move to the optimal diet, let's talk about the suboptimal abundance that's really destroying our health in America, making us overweight and obese, making us so dependent right now on Wegovy and Zepbound and these drugs that are amazing, but it's so sad that kids need them and young adults need them and adults need them. So, look, I'm a dreamer. I don't know when we're ever going to return to a food economy where people actually learn how to cook. I've actually called out, the maker of Ozempic and Wegovy is now the largest company in Europe, the number one highest value company in Europe, more than any fashion or car or banking industry, Novo Nordisk. It ought to be that you have to go to a nutrition class. You have to go to a fitness class. You have to go to a lifestyle management class to qualify to continue to get Ozempic and Wegovy and Zepbound and Mounjaro. They're so expensive. The company can afford it. They can afford an online class that you actually have to finish. Make it culturally diverse so the Latino can do it and the inner city person can do it and the urban person can do it, whatever it is, the rural person. You really should tie these together, but we're just going down the toilet because we've lost that skill of growing our own food, cooking our own food. I mean, every patient I see, and I'm 35 years into cardiology practice, but I know every one of my patients. What's your breakfast? What's your lunch? What's your dinner? What's your snack? Who cooks? How many meals a week out? I just ask. It's fun to talk about it. Where do you eat? People have so many answers and nobody cooks in my house. Nobody wants to cook in my house. I walk in the door at 7:30 and I have to bring, carry in food because there's no food prepared. That's not my life. I'm very lucky to have a wife that makes, amazing. I would even call it simple food, the way food has been cooked for, centuries. And, it's just, combining fruits and vegetables and grains and legumes in my house. And they don't take enormous amounts of time. We've lost all that. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm optimistic or pessimistic, but it's a revolution. I'd rather see our colleges protesting instead of what they're protesting. That's a political statement, but I'm strong on that statement. I wish Columbia University had signs, we want to divest from fast food restaurants. We want to divest from factory farms. We want to divest from, soda pop makers and bring health back to the students. That would be a movement instead of the bullshit we're doing. But
Dr. Kahn, as a cardiologist, okay, looking at these high protein, high saturated fat diets like the keto and the paleo and now the carnivore, as a cardiologist, that's got to concern you. What is your feeling about what's that doing to the heart and what's that going to do to our longevity?
Yeah, all you got to do, if any of you are on Instagram, my friend, I don't mind naming people. They want to be out of the box. Let them enjoy it. Dave Asprey, a dozen years ago, take your coffee, put butter in your coffee, put coconut oil, MCT oil in your coffee, blend it up, have yourself a saturated fat breakfast and feel wonderful till lunch and dinner and then eat whatever you're going to eat. it was the emperor wears no clothes, the biggest BS story ever told. And he made tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars because people are so susceptible to, marketing and the rest. That's just one example. And there's only been limited data on bulletproof coffee with butter and coconut oil. And I hope everybody doing that stops immediately. It's toxic. You'll die, or you'll have no erections for the rest of your life, or you'll get diabetes. But again, I like science. This week in the medical, we can talk science all day long. There's a very powerful article about the effects of the ketogenic and carnivore diet on lipid measurements, cholesterol measurements. And, many, many people respond. There's a rare exception if they don't, but many people respond with like a hyper rise in cholesterol and LDL and inflammatory markers like high sensitivity C-reactive protein. Do we have all the science we need? We don't have all the science we need, but we have science. And, Dr. Walter Longo, professor, University of Southern California, the best nutritional mind in America, in my opinion. Maybe you want to extend that to the world. Always says there's 5 pillars of nutritional science. There's basic biochemistry. Do you think saturated fat raises cholesterol? We got ample basic biochemistry. Do we have randomized studies that saturated fat raises cholesterol? We're talking ketogenic, paleo, bulletproof coffee, garbage. Yes, we got basic science. We have randomized studies. Do we have epidemiology? Oh my God, back to Ansel Keys, 7-country study and beyond. We've known for decades that high saturated fat diets kill people. And that's not what Dave Asprey is saying. That's not what keto and paleo people are saying. Kills people. We know that. Do we have, centenarian studies of people over 100? Do you think people over 100 are drinking bulletproof coffee and keto diets and paleo diets? Gag on that. That's the biggest lie in America. That is the emperor wears no clothes. And people are so vulnerable because they're so confused by all these messages. They think there's actually some data for bulletproof coffee and other approaches. And then you have the impact on the environment and the animals. And we know that any animal heavy diet is horrible for the planet. And it's obviously horrible for factory farm animals, which is 95% of animals. So we get this over and over. And just as an example, you reached out to me and I said yes, because you're a big shot in podcasting. You've had Linus Pauling. Now you got me. That gives me goosebumps. Just this week, all over the headlines is what's called an umbrella review. An umbrella review is like a massive meta-analysis published in PLOS One. I don't know exactly when this podcast comes out, but this week, what's the impact of vegan diets, vegetarian diets, plant-based diets on heart disease? Major drop. Cancer? Major drop. How about all-cause mortality lifespan? Major drop. And that's just today. And tomorrow there'll be a new study on lupus. And the next week there'll be a new study on prostate cancer. And there'll never be a study on the diets you mentioned. Paleo, keto. I have Google alerts for all these diets. Paleo, keto, carnivore. I'm waiting. Come on, guys. Put some study together. Vegetarian, vegan, Mediterranean. Oh my God, keeps me busy all week long reading the new science. And this week is no exception.
Sure. Well, the average person is caught in the pickle in the middle. There's so many different diets out there. I'm going to pull up something right now from Dr. Gundry here in a minute.
Wait, may I puke for a minute if you're going to bring him up?
I want you to hear what he says right here. I want our audience to listen to this, okay? This is what he talks about.
If you've been following this channel for a while, I'm a big believer in eating lectin-free. Now, every now and then I briefly mention what lectins are and that they're bad for you. But in case you haven't been following along from the beginning, I wanted to take a minute, really explain a few things. I'm going to tell you why.
They're bad for you.
I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
Lectins are bad, but talk about what lectins, where they find and why they're bad.
I hope you'll link to your show. Go very easily after the show. I don't suggest you use Google. I suggest you use DuckDuckGo. which is a much cleaner way to search, and look up The Doctor Show 2017, Joel Kahn, Stephen Gundry. Because I called him a fraud, and I called him the emperor that wears no clothes, who was sitting 2 feet from me. And we're both the University of Michigan trained physicians. He is a cardiac surgeon, me as a cardiologist. And he had an amazing career, of which he made tens of millions of dollars from his practice and his patents. He was brilliant. But now he likes to lie for money. And a lot of people lie for money. Stephen Gundry lies for money. He does, no doubt. And this is lying for money. Because if you look at, I won't call the Blue Zones research, but it's a great project. You know, the number one food of the 5 blue zones, and there may be 6 or 7 now. They're talking about a new region as being number 6, and I'm blanking for a minute. But the common food is legumes. There's Stephen Gundry quoting nothing, publishing nothing, making money on lectin blocker. And here's people trying to actually analyze the diet of centenarians. Legumes. You ask Dr. Walter Longo, University of Southern California, what do you have for dinner? He eats lentils. I've interviewed him many times on his diet. That's a legume. And you look at the global burden of disease study, one of the largest, best funded studies in the world, Bill Gates Foundation, not my favorite, but Melinda dropped out, so I have to call it the Bill Gates Foundation now to bring it just up to date 2 days ago. What's the food that adds longevity to your life in the global burden of disease study 2019? It's legumes, followed by nuts and whole grains. So Gundry's wrong. Gundry's a fraud. Put him in the same class as Dave Asprey, wealthy liars, wealthy people that deceive the public to make money. And that's a problem. Now, is there a person in the world that is reacting to legumes adversely, or deadly nightshades, can't eat peppers or eggplants or tomato seeds? Yeah, there's people. But is it 2%, 1%, 0.1%? And that's not the message for the 98%. So I'm tired of people lying to the public when you have really good scientists like Chris Gardner at Stanford, PhD, and Walter Longo, University of Southern California, PhD, that actually Dr. Longo donates any money he makes from nutrition research to cancer foundations. I mean, these people are driving Bentleys and deceiving the public. So I'm calling them out. Shame on you, Dr. Gundry. Go away. You got enough money. Go buy a villa and stop talking.
I love it. Let's shift right now to I picked this up on the internet, and it's this Dr. Edie's, and she's really big on animal diets and animal protein diets and saturated fat. I want you to listen to this, and I want you to respond.
I'm going to throw up again.
Don't have animal foods in the diet when the brain is developing, to try to help people understand how dangerous this is. And you don't hear that when in mainstream messaging about plant-based diets. You never hear the ifs, ands, and buts about vegan diets. You know?
So she said it's dangerous for
all those demented, retarded children raised on vegan diets. There's, oh wait, is there any research on that? Or or are there people like Leonardo da Vinci and Pythagoras and my 30-year-old daughter, who was raised on a vegan diet and is a big executive in New York and graduated at the top of her class at an Ivy League and all the rest? It's you know, she says this and she has her bias. Come on, bring it on. Come on, show me the IQ studies of children and teens that eat a whole food plant-based diet of diverse foods with fruits and vegetables, legumes, nuts, and seeds. Yes, we do take supplements. We take, you know, $1 a day of B12 and vitamin D and algal omega-3. I can tell you the name of a supplement that does it all, just all at once, and a few others out there. But it's, you know, well, what don't we get according to this new study this week in PLOS ONE and so many others? We get less cancer, less heart disease, less diabetes type 2, and less obesity, and less need for Ozempic and Wegovy and Manjaro. We're not the ones that are going to ruin the economy with a $1,000 a month drug. It's the garbage eaters and the followers of some of these other people you mentioned. Yeah, There's actually a Michael Eads and a Georgia Eade, and there's Nina Teicholz. Thank God we don't hear much from Nina Teicholz anymore. The big fat, whatever, the big fat lie. I mean, I've read her book. I've called her out. Maybe you have a clip from her. I'd like to see it.
Well, I do have a clip right now. Let's go to her right now. She's another really big.
I know that. Nina Teicholz, a journalist. She's got no PhD, MD, master's. Boy, has she been, absolutely berated on the web. But he sold her $2 million worth of books.
Here we go. Listen, here we go.
Super important clinical trials in the 1960s and 70s. The data came out from those trials. They did not support the idea that you should restrict saturated fat to prevent heart disease. That was such contradictory data for the American Heart Association, the National Institutes of Health, that had already adopted a policy of telling people to restrict saturated fats.
So she's saying in this here that the studies that were done, the clinical data of the 22 studies was not valid.
Was she talking about? Is she talking about Ansel Keys and the six?
No, she wasn't. It wasn't about Ansel Keys. It was about the studies that the American Heart Association and the American Cancer Association based their recommendations on. There was 22 clinical trials that they said that animal protein increased the risk for heart disease and cancer. She said there was no. She said now that the data has come out and it's been reversed.
She can say whatever she wants. She has no medical training. She's a journalist. She made all her money from one book in 2014, and she needs to go away also. She needs to sit in a room with Gundry and Asprey and Eads and have their little party. But she doesn't need to influence American health policy. There was controversy. Just listen. In the 1940s and 50s, heart attacks went up a lot. Soldiers came back smoking. Mothers went to work. They stopped cooking. McDonald's came abundant. All kinds of cultural changes, food changes, nutrition changes. Heart attacks went up. Our good President Roosevelt died of hypertension. Our good President Eisenhower had a massive heart attack. Then National Institute started funding studies. One, not the only one of the studies it funded. One big one was called the Framingham Heart Study, of course, that concluded that saturated fat in the diet was related to heart disease risk. I mean, they had no skin in the game. Those researchers didn't own broccoli farms, for God's sake. They didn't own vitamin companies like Dr. Gundry. They didn't own coffee and coconut oil companies like Asprey and some of the others. And then there was Dr. Ansel Keys. I'm his biographer. So bring it on. You want to fight about Ansel Keys, a guy with 2 PhDs at the University of Minnesota who started studying nutrition way before the fat debate came on. But when he saw executives in Minneapolis, where he was a professor at the University of Minnesota, start to have more and more heart attacks, he did some analysis. He had a clue. Maybe fat in the diet that was rising was the factor. And he did more analysis and said, it's not all fats. It's not monounsaturated fat. It's not polyunsaturated fat. It's not omega-3 fatty acids. It's not fatty 15, C15. It's saturated fat. So he set out in 1958 with 17 co-researchers all over the world, the cream de la cream, except they were studying cream. And they took 12 years to publish a study called the 7-Country Study. What in the diet was related to coronary heart disease and high cholesterol more than any other substance in the diet? Saturated fat. Published 1970, 1,000 pages, not a small publication. And Ansel Keys has been berated, but he was joined in that effort by some of the biggest names in nutrition research in the world, some of whom are still alive at like 99 years old. He died at 100.5. Jeremiah Stamler died at 101. These guys, followed the Mediterranean diet, olive oil, not butter, and they did amazingly well themselves. That did influence the American Heart Association. That's called peer-reviewed science of a massive nature international study, and it's really never fallen off. Every nutritional society of cardiology in the world says, reduce your saturated fat calories to less than 10%, less than 7.5%, less than 5%, or to the minimal amount possible. There is no cardiology society in the world that advises otherwise. There's Georgia Eads, and there's Nina Teichol's the journalist, and there's Dr. Gundry. Dr. Gundry actually doesn't suggest high saturated fat diets, to his credit. He just wants to sell you a vitamin to block your lectins. So, I mean, we've been so misled that now, is the American Heart Association perfect? No. Why do they put their I'm involved in I raise money for the American Heart Association because I think CPR training is a good thing. And some of the grants they give are good. Should they put their symbol on some of the foods they put their symbol on? Shame, 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 American Heart Association. Stop that. Stop raising money from some of the industry you take money from. Just watch the documentary called What the Health that I was interviewed on, and watch the whole documentary. But they do good work overall. They just have been down a wrong path for sure. And they made another mistake. There was clearly a influence by one researcher at Harvard, that Hagestead, I had to think of his name, in 1965, we're talking old research, that he took some money from the sugar industry to upgrade fat and downgrade sugar as terms of a heart toxin. I've read his studies. They're so esoteric. I don't think one person actually, read the whole study. And he should never have taken money from the sugar industry. But there's this repeated statement that Dr. Ansel Keys took money from industry. That's absolute garbage. There's a lot of garbage out there. And that the American Heart Association took money from the oil industry to downplay the impact of saturated fat and stuff. That's not true.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Okay, there's a lot of these people in these various crazy diets that say that genetic predispositions require each person to have a specific type of diet. Some people are meant to have more animal protein. Some people are meant to have more plant-based diets. Is there any evidence to show that has truth to it?
When you hear that, people usually talk about the blood type diet, a book that sold, if I remember, 15 million copies. With the promise the author was going to publish all the data to support it. I'm sure the author is sitting in St. Bart's in his beautiful villa and has never published the data. It's largely been discredited. Just go look up a great video on nutritionfacts.org about the blood type diet and it being discredited. I have to say, I have some patients repeatedly tell me over time, I'm type O blood and I know I need to eat meat. I feel better with meat. I don't know what to do with that data. I don't laugh at them. I don't tell them they're wrong or crazy. I don't think the science supports it, but people are allowed to follow the path they're allowed to follow, even if it might do them harm. All I can do is, advise them of otherwise.
Sure. So, what about how does an animal-based diet, a high saturated fat diet, high protein diet, how does it affect the microbiome?
That's a good question. And there's actually, I think, lots of data, some of it in the animal world, always less of it in the human world, that if you look at what disrupts our intestinal wall, our enterocytes, what leads to the leaking of lipopolysaccharides, bacterial products, and leads to the rise in a chemical called zonulin, not everybody hears about, but Dr. Alessio Fasano at Harvard has done so much amazing research on zonulin. It's saturated fat, and coconut oil is one of the worst. And I know that's coconut oil comes from the plant world. There's really only coconut oil and palm oil from the plant world that are super rich in saturated fat, actually more than meat and cheese and dairy. And they're great examples of how dangerous saturated fat can be on your gut barrier. And that's fairly definitive. So if you look at olive oil, it's not the same. Canola oil, organic, not the same. I don't like canola oil. I like olive oil. But, high saturated fat foods break down our gut barrier, release bacterial products, and set up a process called metabolic endotoxemia, which can lead to chronic inflammation.
So the microbiome is disturbed by excess animal protein. I've seen some research, even out of the Cleveland Clinic, to show that the animal fat, animal protein, and saturated fat increases the growth of harmful and pathogenic bacteria. Have you seen more evidence on that?
No, I mean, I've seen that data, not more than what you just mentioned.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay, so what about the fact that people who are eating vegetarian diets, and you see people who are eating vegetarian diets and they're overweight? Why is that?
Well, number one, there's such a range. Just talk about people from South Asia, Indians, where there is, largely, I had a patient yesterday from London by telemedicine of Indian origin, still eating a traditional Indian diet. That's just the way he cooks and his wife cooks. What do you find in a traditional, Indian diet? You find ghee, you find paneer, their cheese, you find oil, you find, incredibly high fat and probably high saturated fat diet. They do avoid, beef based on, Hindu religious beliefs, which I honor and I think is amazing. But nonetheless, you call that a healthy diet? South Asians have, maybe on a genetic basis, maybe on a dietary basis, an incredibly high incidence of prediabetes, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. So, a vegetarian diet can vary. If you tell me, Doc, I eat, basically whole food, plant-based diet, but there's occasionally some fermented cheese, fermented dairy, I'm not going to have too much a problem with you overall. I'd rather you eat a whole food plant-based diet with an occasional fish or seafood, like Dr. Walter Longo recommends in his amazing book called The Longevity Diet. But that's also pretty much a dairy-free diet. The Mediterranean diet is not a dairy diet. That's a dairy-free diet. So,
Is Dr. Longo still living?
Dr. Longo? He's 55 years old. He's the sexiest human in the world. He's single. Yeah, Dr. Longo publishes, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the most important research studies on nutrition.
How old is he? How old did you say he is?
I think I'll do him well, but say he's 55. We'll have to check his Wikipedia.
Okay, I'm not really familiar with him. I have to look.
Dr. Longo is, born in Genoa, raised between Genoa and southern Italy, called Calabria. It's not recognized as a blue zone. He feels it's a blue zone because he said I had so many relatives that were living over 100, and came to America at age 18 went to university in northern Dallas called Denton to be a rock star. He was an amazing guitarist.
Wow.
After a while, he said, this isn't really what I was meant to do. And I know a lot about aging from my Italian background. And he's become, appropriately, one of the most celebrated nutrition experts in the world. And his book, if you want to read one book called The Longevity Diet by Dr. Longo, is the book everybody must read on nutrition, even though it's not a 100% plant-based program. It's a 90% plant-based program with
Dr. Kahn, back in 2000, I don't know, maybe around 2000, and I think it was probably 6, I wrote a book called Carbs from Heaven and Carbs from Hell. I wrote it in response to Dr. Atkins' diet, and I thought it was pretty bizarre back then. Anyways, that's when I wrote that book. And in that book, I had maps of actually the Mediterranean diet, the Asian diet, and the South American diet, the Costa Rica and those regions. I had maps. I had all food pyramids from all those regions. And that was 6 years before National Geographic came out with their study on the blue zones. I had pinpointed the blue zones in my book. If there's any call to fame that I had, I actually did a lot of research, and I revealed that back 6 years before the National Geographic did their research.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Yeah, because very friendly with Dan Buettner, the guy who gets some of the credit, most of the credit for the blue zone concept. But here you are, you're the guy. You just
well, no, I got
didn't-
lucky.
you didn't commercialize it like Dan Buettner. You did a good job.
No, I believe that the common sense, we lost common sense. And I think common sense, dictates that if you look around the world, when you look at the people like you talked about, the different regions and the blue zones, now we've got science to backing up that, and everything that they do is in cooperation with nature. And when you put those three things together, common sense, evidence-based, and cooperation with nature, you can't go wrong.
Yeah. No, I agree. You got to think about, and again, I'm not a hardcore whiny vegan, but we do need to worry about the health of the planet, and we need to worry about the health of the animals that we're so abusing and making sick with antibiotics and factory farming. And people say, yeah, regenerative farming, and it's a wonderful thing, but it's feeding 2, 3, 4% of the elite in the world, not the majority. And then, we got to worry about our own health. And we got study after study after study saying plants, 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 plants for diabetes type 2, plants for neurologic disease and brain disease, plants for cardiovascular disease, plants for hypertension, plants for weight. There's randomized double-blind studies. That's what you need to do if you're going to convince the medical world. But then we get to our bloodlust, our meat lust, our mother's upbringing, and 1,000 other factors. And we really don't eat what the science says, but that's what we're talking about.
What about the acid alkaline balance in the body? What does animal protein and saturated fat do to the acid alkaline balance? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. And, not everybody knows the name. Everybody should know the name Russell Jaffe, MD, PhD, who's one of the leading, researchers and practitioners. And he owns a supplement company and testing company. He's a great guy. He's a very humble guy, but brilliant. And, he's written a book called The Alkaline Way, and he talks about, for sure, about how there is a acid wave when you eat animal protein, and you have to buffer it, and you buffer it with breaking down your bones and other, pathologic mechanisms to keep your pH balance so intricately, perfect and normalized. And on the other hand, most plant-based foods are alkaline in nature. And, these are very subtle, small fluctuations in pH that we don't monitor. There's no good way to monitor. The best thing you can do is you wake up in the morning, you pee in a cup, you put a little dipstick, and you see the pH of your first morning urine. And if it tends to be a little over 7.4 alkaline, you're eating in an alkaline wave, and it's good for your bones and your overall system. If you wake up and your pH is less than that, you've got an acidic morning urine, and you want to adjust your diet. And it's going to be, more plant-based alkaline foods. You don't have to do alkaline water. You don't have to do apple cider vinegar. You need to eat an apple, and you need to eat lentils.
Mm-hmm. So what is your day like as far as what you eat? Kind of share with us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's not absolutely set. I'm a breakfast eater, a small one. I'm always, on the run, even on the weekend. I'm in charge of my house of leftover cleanup. So, once in a while, lately a little bit more than average, I might make a smoothie with flaxseed and blueberries. And lately, and I hate to keep saying this, but Dr. Longo came out with the first patented research plant protein powder called L-protein. I love the flavor. So I started to make some smoothies again in the morning, and I add in a little bit of, berries and flaxseed. I think it's delicious. He's got a couple papers in press about how this is a protein that doesn't raise your mTOR and doesn't raise your IGF-1, but you got to wait till the publications are out. If I don't do that, I might eat a salad. I might eat a lentil loaf. I might eat whatever my wife has made. I like leftovers more than she does. But, we're talking 5 minutes. In the morning, during the week, I don't have a lot of time. On the weekend, it might be a tofu scramble, might be a lentil dish, could be avocado toast, or something like that. I'm not adverse to peanut butter and jelly. Lunch, I bring to the office. I used to bring plastic. I don't bring plastic anymore. I bring glass. And it's a relatively small meal, lentils and grains and vegetables. Very often, leftovers from last night, just to be efficient. I've recently found a couple companies that make like lentils in a cup. Just throw some hot water in. I'm finding them so filling for modest calorie intake and so delicious.
Have you ever tried Dr. McDougall's black bean soup that you just add water?
Over the years, I love Dr. McDougall. Interesting personality for sure. Wonderful guy. And yes, over the years I have. To say I've done it recently, I haven't done it recently.
That's one of my go-to. That's got like 20 grams of protein in it. It's absolutely delicious, and it's a quick to go food. It's really good food. So I think that.
We're mentioning a brand. I have no connection. Take a look at a new company called Lentiful, not plentiful. Just take the P off. Lentiful, and they've got these cups like Dr. McDougall. Spiced lentils, and
nice.
200 calories, lots of protein, and they're just delicious. And seemingly, I make it to dinner, no problem. And dinner, I'm very lucky. I walk in the house. I maybe eat out 2 times a month, but I walk in the house and my wife has, a simple plant-based meal. Tonight was a lentil loaf, always a gorgeous salad with balsamic and olive oil. And, sometimes broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts side dish. Tonight was Brussels sprouts, and I think about it. And I'm pretty full. I don't need to eat too much more. I definitely love sweets, but, I'm not going to have any tonight. A couple of nights a week, I'll have a glass of dry red Italian wine. I'm good with red wine. I'm good with olive oil. Those are Mediterranean diet, staples. But
sure. How important is to have variety into your diet?
Yeah, there are people that say for a microbiome, we used to say, 5+ servings of fruit and vegetables a day. Now people talk about 30 different fruit and vegetables a week. That's a big goal. You make the goal too hard, people retract. I'll just eat steak. But I don't have 30 fruits and vegetables in my refrigerator right now. I guess if you went frozen, got a mixed fruit bag and a mixed vegetable bag of organic vegetables, you might make it. So I think, people talk about that, but it's not all that doable at all. But yeah, diversity is good, try new stuff. I'll eat a guava when I'm out of town, and papaya and mango. Those aren't my mainstays. Star fruit, and, bring up some other ones. I'll always eat pomegranates when I get a chance, but I can't say they're daily activities. And if you do, you're probably going to get them frozen, organic frozen, then you'll have them.
Yeah, the people in like in Ikaria, Greece, they're eating 150 or 200 different types of plant foods in their diet. They're getting so many different varieties because they're getting foods from foraging. They're getting kind of herbs. I find it pretty simple to get a wide variety of plant-based foods just by eating fresh herbs and a lot of beans and nuts and seeds. You just add that up, and I took an inventory, and it's not hard to get 150 foods every couple of weeks into your diet if you just keep on rotating. And the more variety you have, as you know, it's going to encourage different microorganisms because they all like different foods, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's a great goal. And I think you bring up, herb mixes. The only problem with herb mixes, they're wonderful choices. They're certainly better than salt, but you're not going to get fresh out of the garden herb mixes unless you have an herb garden. But, a good, I hate to say a brand like Mrs. Dash or something like that, you might get 20 different, herbs in a container, and probably don't want to have a 10-year-old, bottle in your pantry. You want to get something a little fresher, but that is a good approach. And, you could bring up the point, well, how about a protein powder or a vegetable powder that has, 20 different fruits and vegetables, or a capsule? Obviously we're a long way from the garden. We're a long way from fresh, but they're always better choices than, throwing butter and coconut oil on top of a meal.
Sure. I always tell people, you could have your own garden in your home by growing sprouts. Broccoli sprouts. Are you familiar with Dr. Talley, right? And his research on broccoli sprouts?
Yeah, I'm familiar with that, but I usually pull up Oh, I'm blanking. Doug Evans. If people know, Doug Evans has become the man of the people with sprouts, and he's got a company that sells broccoli, organic sprout seeds. Doug Evans, and he's one of the most. He's got a book that's like it's in 20th edition on sprouting, and yeah, we use his sprout jar and his sprout seeds. I just love his energy about teaching the average person, to sprout at home.
Yeah, I just for some reason lost you there for a second. I apologize. I'm not sure what happened, but in any event, this has been really a very, very interesting conversation. I know you're tired. You've been going all day long. I don't want to abuse having to have you stay any longer. So I want to thank you, but I would like to invite you back in the future when you're not as tired.
Okay. I'm gonna have to think about that weekend. Yeah, it's just been a very good, very long clinic day. Threw in a Dr. Phil interview and got emails to patients left to do. I love my work. I'm not going to say occasionally it isn't over the top, but I don't turn down an opportunity to talk to a big shot like you. So thank you so much.
You've been gracious, and I just really would like people to look at your books. You've been an author of several books. Give us the name of your books that you've written.
Well, the ones I'd for sure look at if you're kind. There's a genetic cholesterol. I'm just looking if I have a copy near me, but shamefully I don't. There's a genetic cholesterol. Oh, I do. Look at that. Called lipoprotein little a that everybody needs to get schooled on. Lipoprotein little a. And this is the only book in the world that describes what it is, why you should know about it, what you can do about it, and what you need to look forward to in the future with research. So this is a critical book. And more important, get your blood checked for lipoprotein little a. It costs maybe $30 at all the major labs. And I wrote a book called The Plant-Based Solution, why you really ought to emphasize plant diets. And one other one called The Whole Heart Solution, more of an integrative approach to what you can do from sauna to exercise to diet to stress management. So
what's the name of that book? What's the name of that one?
Whole Heart Solution, Plant-Based Solution, and Lipoprotein A. I'm due for another book, but books are big, big project. So I'll do one soon.
Sure. Well, thank you so much. This is Dr. Joel Kahn. He's a cardiologist, and he's very, very gracious to come on after a hard day in his clinic, as well as being on the Dr. Phil interviewed on Dr. Phil program. So thank you so much, Dr. Kahn. I hope that you have a restful and peaceful evening.
I appreciate that. Thank you for all you do.
Good night, my friend.
Good night.